Marcus Carter knew the temperature was dropping before he even opened his eyes. The cold had a way of pressing against the windows of the old farmhouse like something with intent, and at 4:15 in the morning, with the wind coming out of the northwest, he could feel the orchard dying 1 degree at a time. In the next room, Lily was already awake. He could hear her moving around, the soft thump of her feet on the hardwood. "Dad? Out here in a minute, baby. Get your coat." She appeared in the doorway of his room wearing her mother's old fleece, the sleeves rolled up 3 times and still too long. Her hair was in 2 braids she'd done herself, tight and even, better than anything Marcus had ever managed. He'd tried learning after Claire died. They walked out into the dark together. The orchard spread out before them in neat rows, 212 peach trees on 12 acres of Calhoun County soil that had belonged to a Carter for 3 generations. Marcus's grandfather cleared this land. His father planted most of these trees. And Marcus was watching them die. The frost had already started settling. It came down fine and white, almost beautiful if you didn't know what it was doing to the bark. Marcus walked to the 3rd tree in the 7th row, the one that had worried him most last spring. Now he touched the trunk on the southwest-facing side, and his fingers found the cracks he'd been dreading. Sunscald. What he learned made him angry. The solution was almost laughably simple. White latex paint. Reflect the sunlight. Keep the bark cool and dormant. That was it. 9 trees dead last winter. 5 the year before. 2 the first year. At this rate, the math was unforgiving. For more winters and there wouldn't be an orchard left. For more winters and Lily would be 14, watching her father lose the only thing her grandfather and great-grandfather had ever built. Marcus stood in front of that dying tree for a long time without moving. Lily waited beside him, the flashlight steady in her hands, and she didn't ask questions because she'd learned when to be quiet and when to push. After a minute, she leaned her head against his arm, and that small weight was what broke him out of it. "Come on," he said. "Let's get ready for school." The morning routine was a machine they'd built together over 3 years. Marcus scraped the burned part off the toast while Lily counted out lunch money from the jar on the counter, quarters, dimes, nickels, stacked neat. She was $1.75 short this week because he'd had to buy a new belt for the irrigation pump, and she didn't complain. Just wrote herself a little IOU on a scrap of paper and put it in the jar with the coins. "You don't have to do that," Marcus said. "Dad, you always forget which weeks are short." "I'm keeping track." She was 10 years old and she kept track of things. His truck, a 94 F-150 with 287,000 miles on it, stalled twice before it started. The first time, Marcus pumped the gas 3 times and tried again. The second time, he sat there with his hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at the frost melting off the hood in thin streams. Lily reached over from the passenger seat and touched his wrist. 3rd time's the charm. It started on the 3rd try. It always did. At the feed store later that morning, Marcus loaded 2 bags of fertilizer into the bed of his truck and tried not to think about the $4,000 in his checking account. Claire's medical bills had taken 3 years to clear after she died. 3 years of working overtime at the processing plant in Anniston, 3 years of Lily eating free lunch at school and never asking for new shoes, 3 years of watching the orchard slowly fall apart because there weren't enough hours in the day or dollars in the bank. Dale Whitmore was holding court by the register when Marcus walked back inside to pay. Dale owned 800 acres, ran 40 head of cattle, and spoke for the whole county whether anyone asked him to or not. He was a big man with a red face and the kind of confidence that came from never having been wrong about anything in his life. "Heard you're painting your trees," Dale said, loud enough for the whole store to hear. "Like a damn house. Carter, you finally crack." The men around him laughed. Marcus paid for his fertilizer and didn't answer. I'm serious now, Dale continued, stepping closer. You're gonna spend money you don't have on paint. For trees. Son, when a tree dies, it dies. That's farming. You can't pretty it up. Marcus took his receipt and folded it once, twice, and put it in his pocket. He thought about his father, who'd planted the giant heirloom peach tree by the east fence the year Marcus was born. That tree was 39 years old now, and last season its fruit had been small for the first time, its leaves yellowing early. It was showing its age, and so was everything else on this land. My daddy used to say a man shouldn't be afraid to look at the thing everyone else has decided not to see, Marcus said quietly. I'm looking, Dale. That's all. He walked out before anyone could respond. At the hardware store, he bought 14 buckets of white latex paint. $312 total. The clerk rang it up 3 times because he kept losing count, staring at Marcus like he was trying to figure out if this was a joke. Marcus loaded the buckets into his truck one by one while men in the parking lot stopped to watch. Nobody said anything. They didn't have to. Lily was waiting in the truck after school when he picked her up. She looked at the buckets in the back, then at her father's face. Dad, she said, what if they're right? Marcus turned the key in the ignition. The first morning they painted, the temperature was 28 degrees and the latex went on thick and slow, like spreading cold butter. He showed her how to load the brush, how to work from the base of the trunk up to the first scaffold branches, how to lay it on even so the white would hold through rain and wind and whatever else January decided to throw at them. You missed a spot, Lily said, pointing at a patch of bark near the root flare of the third tree. Marcus looked at it, then looked at her. She was 10 years old and she was correcting his work at 5:45 in the morning. He didn't smile, but something shifted in his face. You're right, he said. Fix it. She did. They fell into a rhythm after that. Row by row, tree by tree, the white spreading across the orchard like a slow tide. At school, it took exactly 4 days for the mocking to start. Tyler Whitmore, Dale's son, 11 years old with his father's red face and his father's confidence, cornered Lily by the water fountain during second recess. My dad says your dad's painting trees because he doesn't know how to farm, Tyler said. He says you're gonna lose the whole orchard and then you'll have to move. Lily didn't say anything. The next day, a girl named Madison asked her during lunch if it was true that her family was poor now. Lily ate her free lunch, chicken patty, corn, milk in a carton, and didn't answer. Marcus noticed she was quiet when he picked her up. He noticed because he always noticed. For 7 years he had been paying attention to the silences between her words, and this silence was different. It had weight. How was school? He asked. Fine. He had learned in 7 years of being her father that she processed things quietly on her own schedule, and then all at once, when she was ready. That evening, she did her math homework at the kitchen table while he heated up leftover spaghetti. She finished her spelling words. She read a chapter of her library book about a girl who could talk to horses. Then she closed the book, pushed her chair back, and walked to the mudroom where her boots were. Marcus watched her lace them up. She didn't look at him. She pulled on her coat, grabbed her brush from the bucket by the door, and walked out into the dark. He followed her. They painted 3 trees that night without saying a word. The cold made her nose run and her fingers stiff inside her gloves, and twice she dropped the brush and had to pick it up and clean the dirt off before she could keep going. Marcus handed her a smaller brush, an old one, the bristles worn down soft, the handle smooth from years of use. It had been Claire's brush, from back when Claire used to help him with the pruning every spring. Lily took it without comment, but she held it differently. She held it like it mattered. Robert Gaines arrived in the second week. He was the county's agricultural extension agent, a thin man in his 50s with a clipboard and the exhausted expression of someone who had spent 30 years explaining basic science to people who didn't want to hear it. He stood at the edge of the orchard in a brown Carhartt jacket that looked brand new, watching Marcus paint the 47th tree. "Marcus," he said. "Can we talk?" Marcus kept painting. "I've been getting calls," Robert said. "People are concerned. Dale Whitmore says you're putting something on your trees that's going to leach into the soil. He's worried about runoff." "There's nothing to run off," Marcus said. "It's latex paint." Robert opened his mouth, closed it, and made a note on his clipboard. He walked closer, squinting at the painted trunks like they might reveal something if he stared hard enough. "I looked into it," he said finally. "The science on this. There's no peer-reviewed evidence that painting peach trees with latex paint prevents frost damage in Georgia. Not in this climate, not with these varietals. Whatever you read, whatever your father told you." "My father didn't tell me anything," Marcus said. "I read the studies myself. Texas A&M did work on this in the 80s. Colorado State did a trial in 2003. It's not new science, Robert. It's just forgotten science." Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he clicked his pen and handed Marcus a sheet of paper. A formal advisory letter, typed on county letterhead, recommending that Marcus Carter cease and desist all unconventional agricultural practices on his property pending further review. The letter cited concerns about soil contamination, water table integrity, and the potential spread of unverified methods to neighboring farms. "It's not an order," Robert said. "I can't make you stop. But if something goes wrong, this letter establishes that you were advised against it. For liability purposes." Marcus took the letter. He didn't read it. He folded it once, twice, and put it in his back pocket. "I appreciate you coming out," he said. Robert stood there for another minute, waiting for something, an argument, a defense, an explanation. Marcus gave him nothing. He picked up his brush and went back to work, and eventually Robert walked back to his truck and drove away. The letter sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days. Unopened. Lily saw it every morning when she poured her cereal, and every evening when she did her homework. She didn't ask about it. She knew her father well enough to know that some things didn't need to be discussed until they did. On the 4th day, she got into her first fight. It happened during afternoon recess. Spring came like a verdict, and the evidence was overwhelming. The 211 painted trees didn't just bloom, they detonated. Marcus walked the rows at dawn on the first full day of flowering, and he stopped at the 3rd tree in the 7th row and just stood there, looking up. Lily found him there 20 minutes later, still staring. "Dad, you're gonna be late for nothing because there's nowhere to be." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was rougher than he meant it to be. "Count the bud clusters on this branch." She counted. 43. Last year that same branch had 11. The neighboring farms told a different story. Whitmore's orchard, visible across the property line, showed the kind of scattered, apologetic flowering that came from frost damage, a blossom here, a bare stretch there, the trees looking confused about whether they were alive or dead. Sutton's place was worse. Marcus drove past it on his way back from the feed store and saw entire rows where the buds had browned and dropped without opening. The unpainted trees had absorbed the winter sun during the day, warmed up too fast, and then the night temperatures had shattered the cell walls in the developing buds. Basic physics. Forgotten science. Robert Gaines returned unannounced on a Thursday morning. Marcus was in the equipment shed mixing a batch of dormant oil spray when he heard the truck pull up. Robert didn't call out. He walked straight into the orchard, and Marcus let him go. 20 minutes passed. 30. Marcus finished mixing his spray and walked out to find Robert standing in the middle of row 12, touching the painted bark of a tree like he was checking a pulse. His clipboard was under his arm, forgotten. "I need to document this," Robert said, and his voice had none of the bureaucratic exhaustion from February. It was the voice of someone who had just watched a theory become a fact. He photographed every row. He measured bud density with a caliper he pulled from his jacket pocket. He took soil samples from 15 different points. He asked Marcus for the paint specifications, brand, dilution ratio, application method, number of coats. Marcus gave him the information without hesitation, without gloating, without the "I told you so" that he could have delivered and would have been justified in delivering. That wasn't who he was. That wasn't who Claire had married. Latex exterior, Robert read back from his notes. Water-based. 1 part water to 4 parts paint. Applied in January before bud swell. He looked up. "Your father's method?" "Texas A&M's method," Marcus said. "My father just remembered it." The research proposal replaced the advisory letter. Robert filed it with the state extension office in Athens, and 2 weeks later, a team of graduate students from the University of Georgia showed up with data loggers and temperature probes. They installed sensors throughout the orchard, comparing the painted trees to a control group of 20 unpainted ones Marcus had left at the far end of the property. The data, when it came back in May, showed a consistent 4-degree temperature differential in the root zone during freeze events. The white paint was reflecting enough solar radiation to delay warming by a critical margin, just enough to keep the buds dormant until the hard freezes had passed. June brought fruit set beyond anything Marcus had seen in 12 years on this land. The developing peaches came in so thick that the branches started bending under the weight, and by the 3rd week, he and Lily were spending every weekend thinning fruit by hand, pulling off every 3rd peach while it was still small and green so the remaining ones would have room to grow. Lily developed a system. She'd work each branch from the inside out, singing to herself under her breath, songs Claire used to hum while she did the same work in the same rows. Marcus didn't mention it. He just listened. "Dad," Lily said one Saturday, her fingers sticky with sap, "if we don't thin these, what happens? Branches break. Peaches stay small. Tree exhausts itself. So we're basically saving them from their own success." He looked at her. She was 11 years old and already seeing patterns he hadn't noticed until he was 30. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly what we're doing." Gary Sutton from the packing house arrived in early July, expecting to negotiate a standard contract. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s who had been buying Georgia peaches for 40 years and had developed the kind of poker face that came from decades of telling farmers their fruit wasn't worth what they thought it was. He parked his Silverado by the equipment shed, pulled out his clipboard — everyone had clipboards in this business — and walked toward the orchard with the weary confidence of a man who had seen everything. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the trees. Marcus watched it happen. The clipboard lowered. The mouth opened slightly. The eyes did the math that couldn't be argued with: thousands of peaches, each one the size of a small fist, coloring up from green to gold to the first blush of red, hanging so heavy the branches had been propped up with 2x4s to keep them from snapping. The packing house manager walked to the nearest tree, picked a peach without asking, and bit into it. Juice ran down his chin. He didn't wipe it away. "Premium tier," he said, still chewing. "Highest grade we've got. The entire harvest." He named a price per bushel that was 40% above standard. Marcus didn't negotiate. He just nodded. Harvest stretched 3 weeks through late July into August.